everyone, and welcome to another episode of DMV Confidential. I'm Kenzie Chase.
And I'm Jenny Gable.
And today, like always, we have another episode for you guys today. And the story that we want to talk to you guys about, we're actually going to give you a heads up, is pretty graphic in some of the details that we might share today. And so we just want to give you that heads up before we proceed with sort of the case and kind of diving into it. But we want to talk to you about a 24-year-old woman who was brutally murdered and raped in her D.C. home. And the case went cold for a lot of reasons, but finally, eventually, detectives started looking into someone who they were led to in their direction based off the history of violence. The story we're going to talk to you guys about today is the murder of Susan Cvengros.
Yeah. So it was May 21st, 1999, around 5:40 p.m., when officers responded to the report of an unconscious person, and this was in the 400 block of F Street, so this is in like the Northeast neighborhood of Washington, D.C. And when they got there, that's when they found 24-year-old Susan with stab wounds, and it was a horrific scene.
They kind of walked in, I mean, we gave you the heads up, and so here we go. They kind of walked into a pretty graphic scene. They walked in and they first saw her face down, lying in her bed. Like in the rear, she lived in like the basement, like in a basement apartment. So they found her in the back bedroom. She was laying face down with her hands sort of tied, not tied, but like on the back of her head, back of her back, like on her lower back.
Yes.
And she also had a pool of blood, essentially, like the sheets and bedding around her head and around her upper body were covered in blood.
Yeah. And she was also found she had several stab wounds to the front of her neck and upper back area as well. So again, the blood was kind of surrounding where she was at. And also investigators noticed that she had what they described in court documents as a tie and a leather strap
like a multicolored tie, or a leather strap is what they said. They also saw like an electrical cord
that had been cut in half.
That had been cut in
from
half.
A lamp.
Yeah, from like a nearby lamp. Yeah. And they also they noticed like what looked like stab wounds. Yeah. She had several stab wounds across her body, up her back, and even like her neck area.
Yeah, so it was definitely apparent to them when they got on the scene that she wasn't breathing and that, a homicide had taken place. But she was actually, I believe, pronounced dead around, 7 p.m. or so officially.
Yeah, so who was Susan? Who is this person that we're about to talk to you about today? Well, so she was described by some of her friends as being shy and quiet. According to a Washington Post article, she was an exotic dancer at some point before she started moving in different directions. She started like a restaurant job in the area.
Yeah, so she wasn't from D.C., as you said. I believe she was from South Carolina, and she had moved to Baltimore at some point and then came to D.C., but she was actually working as a waitress at a restaurant, I believe, in the Union Station area. So she was working there as a waitress and just trying to move her life in a different direction.
Yeah, so that's who we're talking about today. And so getting back to the case, when we talk about the autopsy report, the autopsy report, again, further describes sort of a vicious scene of what we already know to be true. They described, the incisions in the neck and what looks like defensive wounds on her, right arm or right hand.
She had, defensive wounds, like she had been trying to fight somebody off on her right hand. She also had swelling and contusions on her face that appeared she definitely had been in some sort of altercation with somebody.
And the autopsy, the medical examiner does believe that the wound she sustained to her neck, they believe was given to her while she was still alive, just based off of,
which is just
the way it looked. Yeah. I'll just say that the way it appeared, it looked as if she was still alive when she received a wound to her neck, and it was like a large gash, and that was something that throughout the court documents they noted was like this large gash in her neck.
Yeah. So the homicide report ruled again that she died by homicide. And without getting into the jargon specifics of it, it was due to the stab wounds, specifically in her neck and injuring her lung, stab wounds in the torso as well.
Yeah, and so they did also look to see if there was any sort of indication of a sexual assault. And the answer to that is kind of, maybe sort of. they looked and saw that there wasn't any like obvious signs as far as like damage, but they were able to sort of determine that she could have been sexually assaulted based off the evidence that they collected.
Yeah, and they also they took some fingernail clippings from her as well, which is something that we see in a lot of cases like this to kind of see who she may have been fighting off, if there's any DNA that they can.
So they took fingernail clippings. Some of the wounds around her face also indicated she may have been gagged during this incident. And so, I mean, this is just... It's brutal.
Horrible.
I just want to take a second because this is like a lot.
Yeah.
It's like a lot that they're describing, and this is a terrible way for someone to have died.
I just feel like, I mean, as a person, but also, you know, specifically like as a woman, something like this is your worst nightmare.
Yeah.
For this to happen to her, you know, she's just an innocent person, a young woman, 24 years old, new to D.C. area. Like, it's absolutely disgusting. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
So
now we kind of get into investigators actually start collecting more evidence and also start interviewing witnesses.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, police were called to the basement apartment. I don't believe we mentioned this because Susan's former roommate actually came to the apartment with another person to get some of their belongings, and that's when they told officers that they came into the apartment and they saw Susan in this state. And they also said that she appeared like, you know, she was nude from the waist down, and they initially kind of, I guess, stepped out of the room and called out for her, and then when she wasn't responsive, they realized that she was
former
dead.
Roommate also said, like, gave a couple different accounts. First she said that, you know, the door was closed but that it was unlocked, and then when she was interviewed again later, she said that the door was open. So, I mean, a little bit of discrepancies, and you'll actually see that throughout this case as we discuss it. There's going to be lots of discrepancies, but again, because this case kind of went on for a while, when people are interviewed, like, at the beginning or even near the initial investigation versus when they're interviewed, like, 10 years down the line, their stories tend to change a little bit. I mean, I think that's
with
just...
memory as well.
People
like
forgetting. But yeah, so they did interview the former roommate. They also started interviewing more witnesses, including the roommate. The former roommate had, like, a friend with her. That person told investigators that... kind of the same thing, that the front door was shut but unlocked. They also said that, you know, Susan might have been a dancer and potentially even, like, a sex worker.
Yeah, they told police that they had heard different rumors, but it appeared from reading the court documents that this is somebody that was friends with Susan's old roommate. Maybe didn't know Susan that well, but had heard these things, and this is what they told police. But the former roommate
also said that, you know, Susan had begun dating someone and that she was exclusive and she wouldn't have been physically intimate with anybody else besides her boyfriend at the time.
Yeah, so they did tell police that, and it was actually another witness that they did speak to was Susan's landlord, who was actually there at the time.
Right, when the former roommate noticed that something was actually wrong with Susan, she then went up and started calling out and saying, like, Susan's dead. They spoke to the landlord. The landlord was the one that believed to actually call 911, and the landlord kind of was describing similar situation of, you know,
I believe they went to check on 911. Dispatchers told them to go check on Susan, see if she was breathing. She was not breathing.
Yeah, she obviously was not. And then the landlord also said that a former, like he didn't see anybody with Susan any of the nights before, but then later on, like, a family member said that they saw two men with Susan the night before she was murdered.
So they did tell police that the previous day, I believe May 20th, that Susan had let two guys in the apartment. They hadn't seen them leave, as you said, but apparently, you know, they had left. And that kind of goes back to some of the evidence that police collected on the scene, which included, like, a pizza box and I believe they said drug paraphernalia. They had told officers that they were smoking with Susan and having a few drinks and eating.
Yeah, and I want to play a clip from one of the investigators who just talks about, like, the amount of people that they were interviewing.
After all these years, there's re-interviews of witnesses, there's re-interviews and re-analyzing DNA evidence. So we really take our time and go back through them, and they spend a lot of time to kind of bring this kind of case to closure. After all.
So, I mean, you can hear from him, but, like, they interviewed a ton of people in this case, and that includes, you know, that includes another one of her friends that kind of just briefly mentioned Susan had
Yeah.
like this interaction where she went to this home at one point, and when she fell asleep there, she woke up and there was sort of this unkept man asking her for sex, and so
Yeah.
she fled, and that was kind of just sort of a conversation that the two of them had.
That this happened, I believe, like not too far before
Yeah,
she was murdered.
and I think that investigators are obviously, when they're looking into these cases, are trying to figure out who would have had a reason to hurt her, or was there any, you know, person in her life that was like acting odd or suspicious. And so I think that's kind of where that came into play of like, well, she had this man that was asking her for sex. There was also,
I believe she like ran. She described running from the home, like she even left
Yeah.
her shoes behind because
there
she
was also one of them also
Yeah.
said, one of the people that they witnessed, that they interviewed, said that she might have had a problem with a drug dealer.
Yes.
I believe it was her boyfriend. When they finally actually interviewed Susan's boyfriend, he said that Susan might have had an issue with like a drug dealer back in Baltimore.
Yeah, I believe he described that like a year or two prior. Well, Susan told him that a year or two prior there was a drug dealer in Baltimore that she, you know, had some issues with, was maybe afraid of. But now she did live in Baltimore before, now lived in D.C.
Yeah, and
Yes.
this boyfriend that we just discussed, I guess he's not, I don't know if he's technically officially her boyfriend, but he does tell investigators that Susan and him were exclusive. In fact, he was actually planning to come down to D.C.
Yeah.
to see Susan,
And
like the next day.
And I actually believe he told investigators, and another friend may have mentioned this as well, that Susan and him were planning to move in together soon,
Yeah,
like within
so-
the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so they were planning to move in. I mean, they were obviously progressing their relationship. And when all of this happened, he didn't end up coming down because
He was notified
Yeah,
of
because he
what
was
had
notified.
happened.
So, I mean, just imagine how he must have felt. Like, he's about to move in with this woman, and then suddenly finds out that she was murdered in the home that he was about to stay. Well, and I know what
horrible.
everybody's probably thinking now is like, okay, well, so and so said that there were two men at the apartment the day before. Well,
Yeah.
investigators are able to track them down.
Yeah, and there was actually, they did speak with them, and there was some, as you mentioned earlier, Kenzie, some like discrepancies in their interviews. But again, these interviews are taking place like different times during the investigation, so there, you know, there could be different reasons for that. But the two men that were there, they actually were related to another witness who we'll mention a little
Yes.
in a little bit. But they said, one of them said that they had left between 6 and 9 p.m. that night. The other one who was there actually told investigators that he worked between 6 and 10 p.m. every night that week. And they
Yeah.
were actually able to discover later on that he
Yeah.
didn't start at that company.
Yeah, so it's kind of confusing because we don't
Yeah.
have names, but so we're gonna try to do this, and hopefully it's successful. But witness 6 at this point,
Yes.
and witness
Witness
7. These two men are the ones that like said they hung out with Susan the night before she was murdered.
And they were having like pizza
One of them,
and drinks.
I believe the witness number 7 said like he thought it was a couple days before she was murdered, but then later said, oh yeah, it was the night before. And he was also the one that said, oh, well, I worked every single day that week from 6 to 10 at this
Yes.
company. That company later comes out with a letter and says he didn't start employment there until months later.
And I believe
a little odd.
Witness 6 had said that they were the ones that arrived by 6 and left by 9.
Yeah, they arrived by 6 and
Yes.
left by 9. So if you worked from 6 to 10, you missed that entire gap that your relative said that you were there.
And I believe Witness 6 had also told investigators, according to court documents, that they left because Susan said her boyfriend was actually coming over. And
Yeah.
they said that she was scared of her boyfriend because he would pop up sometimes on occasion, and they thought that he may have been from Baltimore
Yeah.
as well.
So, I mean, we kind of hear about, you know, this drug dealer from Baltimore that she might have had an issue with from her boyfriend. Then these two men say that the boyfriend might have been someone to look at. Then we have this man who woke Susan up and like asked her for sex.
Yeah, there's like a lot of moving parts and missing
Yeah.
pieces, especially because, you know, they're speaking to so many people,
Right,
so many
and-
different people that knew her.
Right, and so throughout this investigation, I think it should come as no surprise that there are multiple persons of interest
Yes.
that investigators look at, including obviously the last people that saw her, witness 6 and 7. So
Yeah.
they take DNA samples from them, and they later try to use those to compare some of the DNA that they got from the scene.
Yeah. So they take DNA samples from them, and they, it comes back that there's no link between the witnesses that were persons of interest, including, 6 and 7 in this case. And they actually do take swabs from Susan, described as vaginal swabs, which came back with the presence of one person that wasn't Susan.
One that was
DNA.
foreign to Susan.
Yeah, and it actually came back to somebody named George Purcell Mudd.
Right.
Yes.
So George Mudd is actually, we've come to find out that he is, first of all, related to witness 6, 7, and this 8th person that we didn't really talk too much about, but this 8th person,
witness, was also a friend.
Yeah, witness 8 was also a friend of Susan, also a relative, and all 4 of these, witness 6, 7, 8, and George Mudd, all lived at the same home
on 7th Street.
On 7th Street,
so
which is kind of like a
couple blocks from Susan.
Kind of a crazy dynamic because 3 of them were obviously friends. I mean, 6 through 8.
Yeah.
Are friends with Susan, and witness 8 also saw Susan that night too. He went over after he said he got a voice message from her, and so he went over there briefly, 15 minutes is what he says.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird
short but I guess because they live so close together, there could be different reasons why he
but all 3, witness 6, 7, and 8 all said that they saw Susan the night before, and then their relative is the one that police track their DNA to. I mean, all of that just seems so confusing to me.
Yeah, it's very weird. But again, they took from the swabs, but also DNA from under her fingernails. That DNA did exclude the 2 men that were with her the night before, 6 and 7, but it couldn't exclude George.
Yeah.
In this case.
Yeah. So they finally were able to sort of link George back to it, just because. For one, George had his DNA actually entered into CODIS, which is the DNA FBI database for criminals, and so through that they were able to sort of help narrow it down. But they also used throughout this investigation, they took the DNA from the scene and were able to kind of create a family tree. And we've heard about this before. We've heard about this case happening in Montgomery County. We've heard about this case in some of the other areas in the DMV where they create a family tree from this DNA that they collect. And from there, it takes years.
Can rule out people and things like that. DNA in a lot of these cases really does play a very significant part. And, again, this case was over a span of years, but with advancements, they're able to kind of see. But that also kind of brings us more to some of the witness accounts of George Mudd, including some of his relatives that police did speak to, which were very, very interesting, but also I think a major part in this case to investigators. So witness 6, who we did mention, was a relative and was the one that was there with Susan the night before. He actually said that George, his relative, was a drug user, would regularly, as he described, use cocaine, and he said in quotes, let himself go as well. So he said that during the time of Susan's death, he was using pretty regularly.
Right, and the other relative, the one that was one of the 2 men with Susan before, this 3rd relative came and joined or whatever, he said, so witness 7, for context, if you're keeping track of our numbers here,
Several
witness
numbers.
7, he said that at some point George Mudd, would... I mean, quote, he was, quote, tweaking to use his exact words. And at one point, he had picked up a knife. And so...
I believe, he said he put a knife on him and was, quote, tripping while staring at the corner. Yeah,
so, I mean, interesting choice of weapon when we know that this victim was brutally stabbed.
Right. And I do believe, actually, that I thought of this while you were saying that, Kenzie, that stuck out to me, is that witness 7 actually said that because, again, they were friends with Susan, that she had been to their home a couple of times and had actually had a few conversations with George as well.
Right. So we do know that they have at least met at some point, if not briefly. We don't know exactly how long that conversation was, but yes, they did meet. So she at least knew him. He at least met her. Well, okay, so now detectives obviously are going to go and try to talk to George Mudd.
Yeah, and at this point, I believe it is 2012. I believe August 2012, when they locate George. He's actually at a correctional institute, and they interview him about this incident and about Susan's death, and
Right,
begin
and
asking
Jenny,
him
I
some
think
questions.
I'm going to let you kind of go into the incident that led police, like that led George to be in the correctional institution to begin with, because, I mean, that's a major part of this.
Yeah, so this was definitely a huge red flag for investigators in this case to kind of, you know, put George really on their radar. So it was 2004, taking it back a little bit, April 2004, when police were called for an attempted sexual assault and a stabbing of a woman, and this was on the 700 block of 6th Street in Northeast. So this is actually very close to Susan's, where she lived, I believe 0.2 miles away from her home. That was on F Street.
Right. So, hello. I mean, we have
Yeah.
DNA that cannot exclude George Mudd from this case, from the evidence, from the scene. Then we have George Mudd, who is convicted of a similar crime of a attempted sexual assault and stabbing.
Yeah, so this woman, she told investigators that George was somebody who often she paid to do yard work over the past few years, and she would never let him in the home at night when he would be doing yard work. But this one specific time, he was telling her that he was really upset because I believe he said that his mother had just died and he hadn't eaten in a couple days. He seemed really distraught. So she knew George for a while, and she was like, well, she invited him in, offered him some food and tried to console him, just be a nice, friendly person. But once he was inside the house, that's when she said that he attacked her as she was putting the food away and trying to kind of close up for the night. And he actually stabbed her with, I believe, according to court documents, an awl. He stabbed her in the neck, and without getting too graphic about it, he kind of restrained her. And that's when her, I believe, downstairs tenant who rented from her actually called police. And when police arrived, they found him kind of in the home, she had a stab wound, and she told investigators what had happened. So,
Right, I mean, so a restraining,
yes,
a stab wound to the neck, attempted sexual assault.
Yeah, I believe
I think
he told
this
her,
is all,
yeah,
I mean, deja vu for investigators right now.
Yeah.
But they have to speak to him. So they talked to him, and, you know, George himself was described as, said he was a loner and, quote, didn't trust people. Detectives asked him if he remembered Susan, and he said, like, you know, he did not remember. They asked if he had ever slept with him or if he could explain why this DNA that matches his was found in and around Susan. And he said he could not explain it, but that he did pay a lot of sex workers for sex.
Yeah, I believe he told them that he didn't remember her, didn't remember having sex with her, didn't remember. They showed him photos of her as well and of the house and told him, like, this woman was murdered here. He said he didn't have any recollection, but he said he couldn't explain why his DNA may have been found on and around Susan, as you said, Kenzie, except maybe he might have had sex with her, but it wouldn't have been sexual assault.
Right. So he couldn't explain any of this to investigators, but I don't think it really slows investigators down in their tracks by any means. And so it should come as no surprise that, you know, George Mudd is arrested in connection to Susan's rape and murder.
Yeah, so it is, I believe he was released from prison for this assault sometime around 2015. You know, they kept looking into him based on kind of his history there with the attempted sexual assault and things like that, and the DNA, which this part was actually a bit interesting to me that I had some questions about, but the misplaced DNA.
So the reason part of this, I think, took so long for investigators was because some of these records of evidence were misplaced and lost, which I don't know how, like, a DNA evidence room looks. I just don't understand how you misplace evidence.
Yeah, that was...
Or lose it.
I think we were both, when reading that, because reading the affidavit, it said for years before 2024, they weren't able to locate the data file of DNA, which was just very confusing. And I don't think, I know that we had covered this, one of our reporters had covered this case previously. I don't think that was a question that was ever really answered.
Yeah, as to how they lost it, or what that looked like even.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we do have this case. He's arrested, he's charged, and he's eventually released from, he's actually charged like shortly after he's released for this other woman's, right? Is that correct?
I believe he was released around 2015, and then after refinding this DNA around 2024, I believe he was officially charged with first-degree murder on July 7th.
Okay.
And then he was actually arrested on July 8th, and this was of this year. They actually were able to find him. They were conducting surveillance and saw him driving in the Northeast area.
Yeah,
That's
so
when they arrested him.
still pretty recent
Yeah.
conclusion to this. Well, there's not really a conclusion yet, because despite all of what it may appear, I mean, George Mudd, correct me if I'm wrong, has not been convicted in Susan's murder.
No.
He is currently being held in the D.C. jail, awaiting sort of trial and waiting for a judgment as to whether the courts find him guilty of this or not.
Yeah, I believe he actually, according to Washington Post reporting, pled not guilty to the charges. So he still is saying that he was not involved in this, did not murder Susan. And this is just something that's really interesting to me is, this murder took place so long ago. So he was actually arrested now. He's, after all these years, I believe to be 70 years old, and this case is being brought up again.
So, I mean, you're 70 years old. You're being charged for a case back in 1999. But, I mean, there's a lot of what might appear to be like coincidences, or maybe not coincidences, just about how the parallels, right? The parallels of the thing that he was convicted for and this thing that he is now charged for
seem eerily similar.
Yeah. Right. And, but I mean, we're going to see how this plays out in court. We're going to see if the courts ultimately find him guilty or find him not guilty. But I just think, despite whatever comes from that, I mean, I think just the way Susan was murdered was just so tragic.
Yeah, I think that's something that, I mean, again, working in news, Kenzie, I know you understand this. We hear a lot of brutal things like this, especially doing a show like this. You hear a lot of brutal cases, but reading the court documents for this one really, honestly, just made me feel sick to my stomach. You just feel horrible for her and her family.
Yeah, and I don't want to ever, just bypass that.
Yeah.
We get into these cases and we discuss them, but, I mean, these are real people. This is a real woman who...
She had her whole life ahead of her.
Yeah,
really.
she was about to move in with her boyfriend. She was just moved to this area. She was trying to get away from some of those things of, some of the things from her old life.
Yeah.
And to have this happen in such a brutal way, and then there's just, to go so long without these answers is just, I can't imagine. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
No, it really is heartbreaking. And as you said, I believe the owner of the place that she worked at said that, she was, quote, trying to straighten out her life. She wanted to get a regular daytime job. So she really just had this whole future ahead of her.
Right.
Yeah.
So we will see how this all plays out. If you guys want to hear what happens with George Mudd and whether the courts find him guilty or what the verdict is, I mean, keep watching, because we're going to be keeping you guys updated online, and we're going to be covering more episodes like this. So
if you want to hear more cases like this.
If you want to hear more cases like this, tune in, and we will see you next time.